now, and the road itself is 33 scale feet, which is roughly about 3 inches. I have all my foam tape laid down per the instructions. It does say the Woodland Scenic Smooth It needs a porous surface. Plywood would work. This is optional, but I just find it gives it a lot more to stick to. And since these are module layouts, I don't want any of my plaster popping off. I did glue that piece of cardboard down with some white glue, and I'm just trying to fill the gap here so I'm not wasting too much plaster. So that's pretty much set up now, I think. So we'll go ahead and put some plaster cloth over that and continue with the prepping job that I'm going to be doing here, and we'll get ready to pour.
I start with covering up the cardboard with some plaster cloth. Next, I begin to mask off the unwanted areas to keep the plaster off my track. I mask my existing road, making sure to put a small piece of tape to cover the existing decal, that way not to destroy it when removing the tape. And the last step, I tape up the end of my roads to keep the plaster from spilling over the edge, and we are ready to pour. Following the instructions on the side of the package, I begin to mix up some Smooth It, making sure to mix very well so there's no large chunks. I begin to pour out the Smooth It, keeping the bead about 1 inch wide, being careful not to pour too much. With my provided spreader that comes with the foam tape, I begin to smooth out the Smooth It, making sure to get enough on each side. That way when I run my spreader down, it fills it up nice and evenly. If you have not used Woodland Scenic Smooth It before, be warned, it is somewhat of a messy process. But if you are careful in the beginning on how much you pour, it will greatly reduce your waste and your cleanup. Now there's no real special technique to this, just keeping nice even pressure against the foam tape and going back and forth until your desired look. It does not have to be perfect. We'll be going back and sanding it nice and smooth. Moving on to the crossing, I continue the same process, evenly smoothing it out on each side and going back and forth until the desired look. Here I did use balsa wood for the forms. I do recommend this technique. When the plaster is poured, it wettens the wood, further softening it and making the wood easy to remove. I recommend giving this technique a try. With the last pass with my spreader, I now have a nice completed section of road. Now I can begin pulling up the tape, cleaning up the overpour, and removing the forms. Given the 15-minute working time with the plaster, it is set up enough for me to start removing the tape and cleaning up the overpour. I highly suggest doing this while the plaster is still wet for ease of cleanup. You do not want to let the plaster dry. It will be very difficult to clean up and remove. I go ahead and repeat the same process for my engine facility. Be sure and check for the progress of that in upcoming layout updates. With all that out of the way, we can move on to the next steps. Using a 220 sanding block, I begin sanding down the road, being careful not to sand too much as to expose the plaster cloth underneath. And after a quick vacuum, I use some vinyl spackle to fill in any imperfections. After a quick sanding, another brushing, and a wipe with a damp paper towel, I begin to pour out some ceramic coat, rain gray, and start painting away. I do 2 coats, allowing 1 hour to dry in between, just trying to keep the brush strokes to a minimum. Using my scale ruler, I mark out 1.5 feet for my gutters. Using some pinstriping tape I picked up from my local auto parts store, I begin masking off the gutters. I do like this tape. It does bend around corners easily and is not very sticky. Next, I begin to mix up some concrete color to closely match my existing gutter, using some Apple Barrel Country Gray and Craftsmart Khaki, and begin to paint. After painting the gutters, I let it dry for several hours, and I begin removing the masking tape, and we are ready for some striping. Using Craftsmart ink pens and a ruler with a beveled edge, I start with marking out my crosswalk where I will begin striping my road. Using a ruler with a beveled edge is ideal to prevent the ink from bleeding underneath, leaving you with a very messy line. I start to mark out my lanes at 12 foot wide and begin to draw my double yellow line. Just make sure not to drink too much coffee before this. I draw my inside line and duplicate that on the other side. For the inner black lines, I use a regular ballpoint pen. Continue the same process down the whole length of my road, and for the inner dashed lines for my double yellow line, I went ahead on my ruler and marked out 10 scale feet with a 30 scale foot gap in between, and continue laying out the dashed lines. For a curved line, I used Woodland Scenic's Flexi Edge. For the dashed white lines, I used the same spacing as the inner double yellow dash lines. And to finish it off, I have the Flexi Edge again, marking out the outer white lines for the crossing. So now we can get on with decaling and weathering, and we can really see this road start to take shape. I begin cutting out some micro-scale decals and placing them in the general area where I want them. And with a good idea, I begin soaking them and laying them out. Once satisfied with their position, with plenty of Q-tips on hand, I use a rolling technique to remove the excess water. After the decals have dried, I use some Microsol decal setting solution, usually doing 2 to 3 applications. Using a 0.20mm micron pen, I begin to draw the sealed asphalt cracks in the road. Now this is where you can get real creative and just try and be as random as possible. You can also use a regular ballpoint pen. For added touch of detail, I use the head of a screw to mark out some traffic circles. For other great uses of micron pens on your model railroad, make sure and check out the card link above. For the intersection, where the cars frequently stop, I simulate oil and grime using a diluted mixture of black paint and a micron brush. And blend it all together with a Q-tip. Using some Bragdon weathering powders, grimy gray, I begin to weather the center of the lanes. And with some more black, I further darken it. And follow that up with some more grimy gray, blending it all together. have one heavily stopped intersection. Using a darker shade of gray, I do a small asphalt patch. Using some 04 by 04 styrene strip, I glue down a curb. I painted it with some Testors red enamel paint.
Alright, so here we have the finished road, and we're back from commentary land. To be honest, I'm very happy with the way the road came out. As you can see, it looks pretty realistic. So just juggling with the idea of what to call this video, either an how-to or just the way I do it. But it's pretty universal. It could work for pretty much all scales. All you're gonna have to do is just worry about the decal sizing and the size of your lane striping and all that stuff. But for N scale, this is how I do it. So if you follow the steps I showed you in this video, you could have a cool looking road like this. And it doesn't cost a whole lot. And I hope some of you guys out there learned something. I really do enjoy sharing what I've learned and passing it on to everybody. So with that being said, I'm going to sign out here. Again, I hope you enjoy the video, and make sure to subscribe. I got more videos coming up. More how-tos, more layout updates, and everything else. Alright guys, I'll see you later. Thanks for watching.